Now that our journey in Paldea is almost over, let's discuss what could be next for the newly introduced Stellar type. The route the Pokemon Company and Game Freak usually follow is that they would make this type an entirely sold gimmick for Paldea, and they would leave it there to rest forever. Just exactly what happened to Mega Evolution in Kalos, Z-moves in Alola, and Dynamaxing in Galar. However, there is an issue that makes this case completely different. All the other things they introduced are considered transformation of power-ups beyond the usual structure. What they specifically did in Gen 9 is that they added a whole new typing into the game, just like Fairy, Steel, Dark, and so on. Even though they're trying to make it a gimmick, that decision doesn't make sense to me. So, this case got me thinking, what would happen if they decided to add a Stellar type to the mix of existing ones? That would mean that they have to change how it works, right? If they properly add the Stellar type, I visualize it to work this way. The reasoning behind all of this is that the definition of Stellar mentions that it's related to the stars, so that's why we could associate this type with space. Just keep in mind that I'm not an astrophysicist, so don't take this too seriously. This is just a speculation from a Pokemon fan. Since we're dealing with space, let's talk about its offensive properties. It would be super effective against fairy types because space is bigger and stronger than magical powers. I really doubt that an elf, a pixie, or something like that could do something to it. Also, it would be super effective against itself. This is similar to the case of dragon types, where they are so strong that they reflect each other. The Stellar type would not be very effective against rock type, because several planets are made of rock and they still live in that environment. Also, this is the same reasoning for the Steel type. Certain constructions of this material don't seem to be affected by this. Now let's talk about the defensive properties of the Stellar type. First, for the reasons mentioned before, it would be weak to itself. It would be weak to the Psychic type, because the only power that could move or become a threat to a space is this type of power. The Stellar type would resist the Ghost typing, because paranormal forces would not do damage to what is on another planet. It would be immune to the normal and fighting type, because no power from the earth would be powerful enough to harm it. Now let's talk about a few Pokemon that could obtain this typing. The first Pokemon that comes to mind is the lineage of Galarian Ponyta. I always felt that Galarian Ponyta came from space more than a fairy tale, so that's the reason for this. So, Galarian Ponyta, it goes from being a pure Psychic type to a pure Stellar type, and Galarian Rapidash, it goes from being a Psychic Fairy type to a Psychic Stellar type. The second and one of the more obvious choices is Deoxys. This selection was a no-brainer since Deoxys was formed by the mutation of a virus from space, so its typing would go from Psychic to Stellar. It would also be interesting if its forms also change with the new typing. A couple of other Pokemon that should get the Stellar typing are Carvink and Diancie. Even though these Pokemon come from the underground, I feel like these are meteorites that come from space instead of regular rocks, so it would go from Rock Fairy to Rock Stellar typing. To finalize this selection, we have the most obvious change, Terrapagos. The creator of this type has to have it. Being just a regular or normal type is a crime for me, so that's why it should be changed to a Stellar. So let me know in the comments what you think, and if there are other Pokemon that you consider should have this typing.